Hey everyone, welcome back. Tonight we're diving into a true story. Locals in Kyoto still whisper, a thread of grief that never pulled free. It begins in 1874, in a wooden house near the Kamo River, where floorboards remember footsteps and incense remembers names longer than the living ever do. Before we go further, humor me, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there. Some swear the hour matters. In Japan, the thinnest time is after 2, when lamps breathe, wells hold their breath, and houses listen back. Keep that in mind while we walk right now. The family was the Haradas, Shoichi, a cautious paper merchant who counted rice by habit, Aiko, his wife, gentle, precise, faithful to routines, Ren, 12, quick with string figures, Hana, 8, forever collecting smooth river stones, ordinary people, ordinary corners, a household polished by repetition until it gleamed most days. They kept a small but Sudan in the front room, photographs, memorial tablets, ash that clung to fingers. Every morning, Aiko lit a stick, bowed, and straightened the wooden frame if it leaned. The dead were family. You honored them so they wouldn't hunger, or wander, or press breath against your dreams. Beside their house stood an old stone well, lipped with moss, covered by a lid. Shoichi had carved himself. Children were told not to count near wells at night. Counting wakes memory. Memory wakes company. If you've never heard that rule, you already know how this kind of story begins. Into this pattern stepped an outsider, Kiyoshi Ito, a clerk from Osaka sent to audit ledgers after a supplier vanished. He was polite, careful with hands as if they broke. Aiko offered tea, Shoichi offered numbers, the children offered curiosity. Houses make room for strangers, but they do not forget. You'll ask if this is folklore or fact. People here say both. The names appear in a temple registry, the address appears on old maps, and the well still sits where the street kinks. What returns inside the house depends how you believe breath behaves after it loses a body. There's an older belief beneath the floorboards. Onryō, the vengeful dead, tethered by rage or humiliation. They do not forget timelines or respect door frames. Where ordinary spirits wait for prayers, onryō wait for patterns to repeat. Jealousy, shame, a secret carried alone until the weight cracks the spine of a house. Shoichi's flaw was simple, quiet envy. He resented men who read poetry, men who seemed lighter. Aiko's flaw was simpler, she endured. Kiyoshi's flaw lived behind his brow, a hunger for order that could tip into cruelty when chalk smudged ledgers, small human edges, enough to catch on something, most nights. Neighbors later swore they noticed tiny changes after Kiyoshi arrived. The night cicadas paused together, as if counting. The well's lid shifted a thumb's width. Incense burned faster, leaving a clawed crescent of ash. Ordinary oddities, right? That's how people talk when a story hasn't decided whether to confess afterward. Aiko loved rhythm. Mondays for laundry, Tuesdays for mending, Wednesdays for river stones with Hana. She kept ledgers of rice and oil, small neat numbers. When a page tore, she saved the fiber, pressed it flat beneath a sash. Every household has a guardian habit. Hers was repair, always gentle. Kiyoshi worked at the low table, copying sums, asking measured questions. He praised Shoichi's prudence, admired Aiko's precise stalks, watched Ren's string games become knots that resembled characters. He permitted himself one indulgence, listening. Some people collect stamps. He collected the sounds houses make when they think you're asleep lately. This is the superstition you need before we continue. If a wrong is swallowed instead of spoken, it sinks. It does not dissolve. It pools where water waits. Wells, tubs, drains, even the hollows of the throat. In Japan they call impurity kigere, rinse it away, or it will rinse you. People also warn against counting things that can't be completed. Plates, steps, knots, because an unfinished number keeps the door propped. Someone will come to finish it. The Haradas knew these rules. They taught them to the children. What they didn't know was how fast a house can learn new hunger, soon. So here is the hook, and it's true as weather. Kind family hosted a stranger during a season of audits. A ledger went missing, a rumor ripened, and something old woke in the well. If you've ever trusted routine to keep you safe, ask yourself what happens when routine learns teeth. Act 1 is ordinary life, the shape everyone recognizes before anything breaks. Shoichi rose before dawn, rigged his ledger strap, and walked to the warehouse by the river, where bales of paper rested like sleeping animals. He hated waste. Every torn sheet became wrapping. Every frayed cord found a second duty. Aiko turned the house full of tiny labors into a quiet orchestra. Boil water, wash rice, scrub the tub with salt, Set Ren to fix the bamboo broom. Let Hana choose 2 stones but return the third. Kiyoshi lodged in the storeroom, adjusted to their cadence with a clerk's patience. He wrote neat apologies for taking space, left coins for coal, and kept to corners. On clear mornings, Hana laced twine around her newest stones, naming them after sparrows. Ren practiced cat's cradle figures until string burned shallow grooves in his fingers. At night the family ate while wind tested eaves. The well lid clicked when temperatures changed, a sound Shoichi considered harmless until he noticed the click arrive just as Ren counted 12 loops, or as Hana whispered 2 names. Coincidence, right? That's what he told himself while he checked the lid with a lantern and rapped the stone once as fathers do, to show authority. Authority did not answer. The sound he heard answering from the shaft wasn't echo or water, it was breath pausing and then deciding to continue. If a house can learn the cadence of a family, why couldn't a well learn to breathe, at intervals? People will say later that Kiyoshi started it by counting. He didn't believe in anything but columns and sums, so he read totals aloud while he worked, a habit from Osaka's noisy office floors. 12 crates invoiced, 3 missing, 36 sheets cut, 2 wasted, 5 days remaining until settlement. Counting steadied him. That morning he borrowed light from the courtyard, lifted the lid a fraction to seat his lamp on cool stone, and recited figures while steam rose from the bathhouse roof. Aiko paused in the doorway, hair pinned, sleeves rolled, salt on her knuckles from scrubbing. Don't count near water, she thought, then swallowed the admonition because it felt old-fashioned. Kiyoshi kept going. 9, 10, 11, he frowned, fixed a transposed digit, then smiled at the correction. The well answered by releasing a single bubble, not unheard of in old stone, except this one reached the surface and didn't break. It waited, perfect as lacquer, catching the lamp's shy halo. Ren saw it first, snuck closer, and whispered the number he needed to finish his string figure. 12. The bubble popped, the string knotted itself. In that moment, tiny and domestic, the household acquired a clock it couldn't see. Whenever someone approached completion, something underneath took notice. Coincidence? Maybe. Aiko lit incense and bowed, adding a second stick because her mother had done so after odd noises. Wasn't that how you kept households smooth? Repeat what worked, ignore what pricked, and refuse to name new patterns until they named you first. The first real friction was not supernatural. It was a one page from Shoichi's ledger that refused to present itself. Paper misfiles, pages stick. Yet the sheet contained settlement notes for a vanished supplier, and Shoichi needed it to defend his reputation to a district agent who believed rumors faster than numbers. Shoichi's envy of men who moved lightly reappeared in small ways. He disliked Kiyoshi's immaculate brushwork, the way Aiko praised his columns, the silence he kept while thinking. Aiko noticed and tightened rhythms to ease fray. More tea, more chores, more small kindnesses. Ren and Hana learned to step softer. That evening, wind trimmed itself into a steady thread and passed through the house, making shutters click like slow metronomes. After midnight, a sound joined it that was not wind. It was throat imperfectly remembering how to carry air, a husk of breath starting and stopping like a child learning to swim. Aiko woke, sure Hana was dreaming, and found both children sleeping tidy, palms open. She set water on the stove because water answers worry, then returned to bed repeating the same wordless reassurance every parent knows. It's nothing, it's the season, houses talk. Her mother's voice added, count nothing tonight. So she didn't. The well lid clicked once in what Ren, half awake, would later swear was agreement. At dawn, the incense left a crescent of ash like a fingernail, and the wash basin kept a ring despite salt. If you heard breath, would you tell anyone, or trade it for quiet? On the third day, the house pressed back. Aiko found her darning needle in the wash bucket despite locking her kit. Ren's string figure collapsed into a shape that looked like a character he couldn't read, and when Kiyoshi traced it, his brush spelled the kanji for well without meaning to. He laughed embarrassed and claimed coincidence. Shoichi did not laugh. He had spent the morning at the warehouse arguing with a carrier about miscounted sheets, then the afternoon searching the office for that missing ledger page while a junior clerk, overeager, asked whether the Haradas' address matched the house with the mossy well. The question wasn't cruel, it was thoughtless, and the thoughtlessness stung. Back home, Shoichi soaked his wrists in water while Aiko arranged the dinner tray, and the water left a ring on his skin that refused to dry. He wiped it twice with cloth. The circle remained until Hana blew on it and whispered the number 3 because she had 3 stones today and liked patterns to agree. The ring faded. Aiko added a second incense stick, then a third, then told herself 2 would do tomorrow because superstition breeds dependence. She straightened the Butsudan frame and felt it tilt back by a hair, as if asserting its idea of level. When she released, it stayed crooked. Families live with dozens of tiny unsettlements and call them weather, but if weather answers your counting, who is doing the answering, you or the thing you've taught to wait? That night, Kiyoshi couldn't sleep. He lay listening to the storeroom breathe, convinced the click of the lid had a pattern, convinced he could prove it mechanical and end the nerves that had followed him since Osaka. He rose, took the lantern, and stepped into the courtyard where crickets ran their tiny looms. He lifted the lid a handspan, set the flame down, and counted softly to test his theory. 1, 2, 3 wind, 4, 5, nothing. 6 cicadas paused, 7, 8 somewhere, a shudder, 9 silence, 10 a tiny rising bubble, 11 the bubble held, 12 someone in the house coughed awake. He froze, felt foolish, then angry at himself for feeling anything at all. So he did what clerks do when numbers resist. He looked for the missing input. Lantern higher, he checked the stonework, the rope, the clean circle left by the lid. There, pressed against the dark inner wall above the waterline, lay a page, dry, flattened as if under glass. He reached, couldn't. He lowered the bucket, drew it up, and found the page not in the bucket but on the lip, trimmed neat as a receipt and waiting. Shuichi's ledger leaf, settlement totals, suppliers' names. No stain, no ripple, no tear. He wanted to wake Shuichi, to wake Aiko, to confess he had meddled with counting near water. Instead, he set the page by the Batsudan and watched ash fall around it like snow that refused melt. If a house returns what you lost, what exactly did you give it first? Really? By the fourth evening, the Harada home no longer moved to Aiko's rhythm. The incense ash broke into jagged clumps no matter how gently she pressed. Hana's stones cracked one by one, though she hadn't dropped them. Ren's strings tangled into knots shaped like figures hanging. Shuichi returned from work pale, muttering about clerks whispering the well house behind ledgers. He said nothing to Aiko, but she saw the anger chew his jaw. That night, when Kiyoshi set down his brush, he heard a new sound from the shaft, the careful drag of fingernails on stone, each scrape timed with his breath. He blew out the lantern. Silence. Relit it. Nails again. In panic, he dropped a coin down the well, a habit from Osaka where shrines take offerings. Instead of clinking water, the coin rattled once, then rolled back up and spat onto the courtyard stones, still warm. Hana picked it up before anyone could stop her, pressed it to her ear, and whispered, "It's counting." Shoichi slapped the coin from her hand and forbade mention. Forbidding words only makes them settle deeper. The children whispered anyway, and soon neighbors spoke of hearing coughing outside their windows, the dry choke of someone whose neck remembers pressure. Ordinary coughs became suspect. Ordinary nights felt watched. The well had become not an object but an ear, listening for numbers, waiting for family voices. Aiko began to avoid eye contact with the stone lid, as if acknowledgement alone could finish whatever equation the house had begun to solve. When Shoichi found the ledger page on the Butsudan, he swore relief first, then dread. He should have praised the miracle. Instead, he demanded how it returned. No one admitted. Silence grew between bowls that evening, as bitter as the radish they ate. Later, Aiko folded bedding and found a hair-long, black, twisted threaded into the seams. She pulled, expecting to free it. The hair slid deeper, vanished as if tugged from beneath. She whispered sutras, salt in her mouth. Ren dreamt of ladders of hair descending into water, each rung snapping as he climbed. Hana dreamt of stones arranged in tens, always missing one. Kiyoshi alone pretended rationality, copying pages as if brush and ink could pin reality, but his hand shook, blurring strokes into smudges shaped like eyes. That night, the well clicked without wind. The lid slid an inch. Shoichi bolted it, hammered wood across. At dawn, the bolt lay on the floor, bent outward, the wood splintered from inside. Villagers claimed they heard counting in the courtyard, not voices but throat rattles, reaching 12 before breaking off into silence. One old woman muttered, "onryō." The word spread faster than fire across tatami. In Japan, once named, a haunting doesn't diminish, it strengthens. The Haradas stopped hosting neighbors. Curtains stayed drawn. Every tally mark in Kiyoshi's ledger felt like bait, and every coin in Shoichi's purse felt heavier. The house that once sang routine now hummed unfinished numbers, daring someone to finish the count. Aiko realized too late they were already finishing it for her. The first death came disguised as misstep. Shoichi left at dawn to collect shipments. He walked the same road he had since boyhood, bowed to the same shrine, adjusted the same strap. But that morning, villagers found him kneeling in the river shallows, ledger strapped tight around his throat. No footprints showed struggle, no signs of thieves. His face bore not fear but confusion, as if mid-count. Officials recorded accident, neighbors whispered curse. Aiko burned incense, until her lungs rasped. The children pressed close, silent. Kiyoshi catalogued Shoichi's belongings, hands trembling, whispering sums to steady himself. 1 ledger, 2 sandals, 3 coins, 4 reeds in his mat. At 5, the well lid shifted. He stopped, sweat staining his collar. That night, Aiko dreamt of Shoichi bowing at the butsudan, his neck bent too far. She awoke with salt stuck to her lips though she hadn't eaten. Ren woke screaming numbers he never learned in school, ancient counting words used in shrines. Hana refused to count at all. In silence, she stacked stones by the courtyard, always 9, never 10. The coin Shoichi forbade now appeared in odd corners, beneath pillows, in rice jars, inside Kiyoshi's ledger, each time warm, each time waiting. The well had decided its arithmetic. The household existed only as variables, pieces to be tallied. Aiko lit 3 incense sticks, muttering apologies to gods she barely named. The smoke twisted not upward but sideways, drifting toward the courtyard where the boltless lid smiled like an open palm. The children refused to step outside. Aiko began to fear her own hands. When she chopped vegetables, the knife measured lengths. When she folded cloth, her fingers made rows. Even her prayers broke into counts. 3 bows, 6 claps, 9 breaths. Every pattern beckoned the well. Once she spilled rice and swore she saw each grain twitch. She swept them quickly, burned them in salt. Kiyoshi Gaunt insisted they must confront the superstition. He proposed sealing the shaft with stone, argued that fear feeds itself. That night he carried bricks. Villagers watched from doorways but refused help. He lowered the first brick, then the second. With the third, he heard a voice, not words, not Shoichi, but Shoichi's ledger strap stretching. He dropped the brick, stumbled, swore. The well exhaled. From its lips spilled hair, long and wet, curling around his ankle like a rope. Villagers slammed shutters. Aiko ran with salt, flung it. The hair recoiled, smoking. Kiyoshi gasped, swore gratitude, then wept. But the salt bowl emptied. The well chuckled, or maybe it was water. Maybe the memory of Shoichi choking. Maybe something older. Kiyoshi left the bricks stacked, unfinished. Aiko begged him to leave. He refused. Clerks cannot abandon sums. He needed closure, proof, completion. The household now breathed in 12s. Ren's knots formed 12 loops. Hana arranged 12 stones, then crushed the 13th. Aiko lit 12 sticks of incense, each one falling before it burned fully. The well waited, the family endured, the village whispered, and the counting continued louder, as if rehearsing for a finale no one could survive. By midsummer, the Harada home was a pariah. Children crossed streets to avoid its courtyard. Merchants refused Shoichi's old accounts. Villagers swore the well's shadow stretched farther than the sun allowed, sometimes across thresholds at noon. Aiko confined Ren and Hana indoors, forbidding games. But at night she woke to sound of string figures snapping and stones rolling across floorboards by themselves. Kiyoshi grew sickly, lips cracked, whispering numbers in fever. He confessed seeing Shoichi in mirrors, face mottled, lips mouthing digits. Aiko wept, begged the temple priest. He came, sprinkled salt, recited sutras, bound talismans. The talismans curled brown within hours, as if burned from within. The priest refused return. "This is not Kegara," he said. "This is onryō." That night the well sang, not words but breath, climbing 12 rungs before breaking. Aiko clutched her children. Kiyoshi collapsed by the butsudan ledger in his lap. At dawn, the ledger lay open on the courtyard stones, ink perfect, pages complete including the missing sheet. Aiko counted the entries. 12, always 12. She closed it, but the ash from incense curled around the book like hair. Ren begged her not to read aloud. Hana whispered, "If you say the number, it's finished." Aiko did not. She pressed her lips, prayed for silence, but silence answers too. And when silence breaks, it doesn't sound like words, it sounds like a neck remembering. That was the household's new clock. Every day the counting grew closer to an end that could not end, because an onryō does not forgive, it multiplies. It happened on the 13th night after Shoichi's death. Aiko woke to Hana's voice, soft, steady, counting stones in her sleep. Rin knelt beside her, string looped tight, fingers raw, whispering digits to match. Aiko shook them, begged them to wake, but their eyes stayed closed, pupils rolling like marbles. Kiyoshi stumbled from the storeroom, lantern swaying. He gasped, "They're finishing it." His ledger dropped open, ink spilling like veins across the page, forming numbers without brush. The air thickened, smelling of iron. The well lid rattled. With each rattle, the incense on the butsudan flared, sparks like tiny bones cracking. Then the lid lifted without hands. A figure rose, not Shoichi whole, but Shoichi broken, throat caved, eyes staring as if still calculating. Behind him, hair spilled upward, wet ropes unfurling, wrapping beams and sliding along tatami. The children's voices quickened. 11, 12, silence. Aiko screamed and hurled salt until her hands bled. The salt sizzled on Shoichi's shadow, but not on him, because what rose was not husband, not father, it was arithmetic in flesh. Rage counted through him, voice scraping from a crushed throat. Kiyoshi tried to block the well with his body, but the hair dragged him down, lantern falling, fire smothered in wet air. The last sight Aiko remembered was her children's mouths open, whispering 13, while the well sang back a sound no lungs should make. The counting had finished, but not ended. It never ends once the onryō owns the sum. By morning, the house seemed untouched. The well lid lay sealed, as if never moved. The tatami bore no burns, no hair. The children sat silent, faces pale, each clutching a stone. Hana's head cracked in two. Ren's string hung slack, a knot in the shape of Shoichi's strap. Kiyoshi was gone, his bedding folded, his brush washed, his ledger closed. But on its cover, Aiko saw 12 faint ridges, pressed as if by nails. She lit incense, one stick, then two. The ash fell straight this time. Relief surged, until she noticed the sticks burned too quickly, leaving only half-lengths. She prayed louder. Neighbors whispered she was cursed, yet none approached. That night she barred the doors. But doors keep nothing when walls breathe. At midnight the children began to cough. Not sickness, but the dry choke she had heard from the courtyard. Their throats rattled, each breath dragging like rope. Aiko pressed salt to their lips. They spat it, eyes still closed, counting. The well lid banged from outside, though no one touched it. Aiko clutched her chest, begged Kami to intervene. But gods do not close accounts. They watch, they listen, they wait, and the house itself shifted, beams groaning like teeth grinding. The counting filled every room, echoing without source. When it broke, Aiko heard silence deeper than sleep, and in silence she saw her husband's ledger open on the Butsudan, its pages turning without wind. At the bottom, new handwriting. Her children's names, unfinished, space waiting, ink drying, ledger balanced. Aiko carried Hana and Ren to the temple at dawn, dragging them by wrists heavy with sleep. The priest refused entry, muttering, "Onryō stain wood deeper than salt can clean." Aiko begged. The priest handed her a single paper talisman, already curling brown, and warned, "Never count what cannot finish." She fled. The children dragged their feet, murmuring numbers. 12, whispered Hana. 12, whispered Ren. Their voices twined like cords. She reached the river. The water glittered, tempting. She thought of throwing the stones, the string, the ledger, anything to break the sum. But the river belongs to currents, and currents finish what wells begin. From the far bank, villagers watched, faces pale. They saw the Harada's shadow extend across water, too long, too thin. Aiko knelt, pressed talisman to the children's foreheads. It smoked, turned black. They smiled in their sleep. She screamed. In that instant the river itself hiccuped. One gulp, one pause, and spat up Shoichi's strap onto the shore. The priest later said such things happen. Currents carry, objects resurface. But no river current ties itself in knots, shaped like numbers. Aiko dragged the children home, talisman ashes still staining her palms. That night, her dreams carried her into the well, down its slick walls, where she saw pages floating like lily pads, each inscribed with names, Shoichi's, Kyoto's, hers, unfinished. She woke to find her pillow damp and smelling of ink. Outside, the well lid clattered like a ledger closing. She understood then, the account was not hers to settle, it was theirs. The climax broke on the 15th day. Aiko entered the courtyard at dusk, clutching salt, clutching stones. She meant to end it, to collapse the well with bricks, seal the mouth with prayer. The children trailed, silent. When she lifted the lid, she saw not water but stairs, spiraling down, stairs made of hair, glistening, each step woven from strands of Shoichi, Kiyoshi, ancestors she could not name. She froze. The children stepped forward. Ren's string lifted, knotting itself into rungs. Hana's stones rolled, tumbling down as offerings. Their eyes were open now, blank, counting not aloud but with breath. Aiko screamed, pulled them back, but hair coiled her arms. It did not strangle, it invited. She resisted, she prayed, she shouted. Her throat tore, but the house did not hear. The well sang, a throat's memory of breaking, multiplied. Then she felt hands, small, damp, familiar, push her forward. Ren, Hana, not children now, but echoes carrying her weight. She fell. She landed on the hair steps, knees buckling. Below she saw pages spinning, each page bearing a name, each name unfinished. Her own page waited at the bottom, space empty, ink trembling. She clawed upward, but hair slid slick. The children leaned, smiled faintly, whispered 13, the number no one was meant to finish. She understood then. The curse wasn't Shoichi's death. It wasn't Kiyoshi's ledger. It was the counting itself, the onryō arithmetic, endless, and now she was part of its equation. Neighbors never saw the Haradas again. The house stood silent, shutters drawn, incense smoke curling from cracks though no one entered. Children swore they heard coughing by the well, followed by counting that stopped at 12, then silence. Farmers found Shoichi's strap tangled in reeds, knots forming numbers. Aiko's ledger surfaced months later, washed into a canal, ink blurred into strings that resembled hair. Officials listed the family as vanished. Priests muttered about Kagar too deep for sutras, and the well sealed at last by the city still sweated hair through its stones when rains came heavy. To this day, locals cross the street, refusing to glance at its mossy lid. They whisper that if you count your steps past it, you'll always stop one short, throat tightening, ash curling in your pocket. The Haradas became folklore, a family who kept routines so faithfully the house learned to count for them until it demanded its own completion. Some say Kiyoshi's ghost still tallies ledgers in the storeroom, lips cracked, whispering 12. Others swear Hana's stones surface in gardens, smooth, warm, whispering numbers when pressed to the ear. But everyone agrees on this: never count near water in Kyoto, never whisper numbers after midnight, and if you hear coughing that doesn't end in breath, do not answer, because the well only wants one thing: it wants the sum finished. And once you help finish it, you don't belong to yourself anymore, you belong to the arithmetic of the dead. The story of the Haradas isn't just family tragedy, it's a mirror of Japanese beliefs that still cling like incense smoke. At the center is the onryō, the vengeful spirit. Unlike playful ghosts or wandering ancestors, an onryō never forgives. They return not for conversation but for reckoning. Their rage is considered so powerful it can warp weather, sicken villages, topple leaders. In ancient Heian texts, nobles whispered that wronged women cursed their lovers with storms. By the Edo period, ghost scrolls painted their faces pale, eyes hollow, hair long and black, the same look you imagined rising from the Haradas as well. When a death is violent, when betrayal rots in silence, the spirit doesn't drift upward, it sinks, it waits, and once it wakes, its anger isn't confined to one target, it spreads like ink in water, seeping into everyone unlucky enough to cross its shadow. That's why onryō stories never end with one victim, they ripple outward until entire households collapse. Another belief braided into this story is the danger of counting. Folklore across Japan warns against tallying steps, plates, or knots near wells and graves. Counting wakes memory, and memory wakes spirits. You may know Okiku, the servant girl who counted broken plates from her well, screaming each time she reached 9. The Haradas curse echoes her cycle, an unfinished number replayed until rage finds its conclusion. But here's the trap: conclusions never satisfy the dead. They want repetition. They want your voice to complete what theirs cannot. That's why Ren's string, Hana's stones, Kiyoshi's ledgers, all became bait. Every tally was an invitation. Once you join, you can't stop. Even silence becomes part of the count. That's how folklore works too. Every retelling is another tally, another whisper that keeps the ghost breathing. So when locals warn never to count near water, they aren't protecting superstition. They're protecting memory from finishing itself through you. You also heard the priest whisper kegure impurity. In Shinto and Buddhist traditions, death pollutes. Families cleanse with salt, priests with sutras, but some stains go deeper. Domestic violence, betrayal, murder, those don't rinse easily. They embed in wood, stone, water. When priests say too deep, they mean the site itself has become memory's skin. That's what stigmatized properties, jikobuken, are today. Even now, in modern Japan, landlords must disclose deaths to tenants. People avoid them, not just for unease, but fear that trauma clings like mold. The Harada house, if it stood, would be blacklisted forever, but folklore insists houses can learn. If you repeat routines daily, walls memorize you, they take on your voice, and if rage slips into that rhythm, the house doesn't just echo it, it perfects it. That's why so many ghost stories come from ordinary rooms, because ordinary rooms are sponges for unfinished life. We believe our homes protect us. Sometimes they only record us. So what was the curse really? A jealous husband, a missing page, a stranger who counted too often? Or was it something older, crouching in the well long before the Haradas lived there? Folklore refuses neat answers. That's what makes it frightening. The counting didn't belong to Shoichi or Kiyoshi. It belonged to the onryō arithmetic. Betrayal plus silence, unfinished numbers. Combine them, and the curse becomes self-sustaining. And this story, like all kaidan, wasn't invented to entertain. It was a warning. Don't hide betrayal. Don't ignore impurity. Don't count where memory sleeps. Break those rules and the equation finishes you. That's why Kayako in modern horror films crawls, croaks, repeats. She's not invention, she's continuation. The Haradas were one household among hundreds whose names blurred, but their routines became another ledger in the ghost's account book. Folklore keeps those ledgers balanced, line by line, generation by generation. And if you've listened this far, maybe you've just added one more line. The Haradas vanished a century ago, but their well is still marked on certain maps in Kyoto. Tourists walk past without noticing. Locals cross streets without counting steps. And every summer, when cicadas fall silent for a breath too long, someone swears they hear coughing. Maybe it's wind, maybe it's memory, maybe it's a house finishing its tally. So let me leave you with this. What do you think really happened in that house? Was it a curse born of one family's secrets, or proof that onryō arithmetic waits for anyone who trusts routine too deeply? Tell me in the comments. And one more thing, if you're watching after midnight, count nothing aloud before you sleep, because if the silence answers back, you'll know exactly what number it's waiting for. Sweet dreams. That's enough for tonight. Keep your steps uncounted, your doors half closed, and listen closely if the silence bends toward you. We'll meet again when the numbers line up, when another story decides it isn't finished yet. Until then, don't look back too quickly.